back to Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In today's video, I'm going to discuss a new topic. I'm going to start a series on Ayn Rand's Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. I've done quite a bit of epistemic modal logic discussion and sort of the modality of logic in previous videos. And Ayn Rand's discussion on epistemic modal logic, or not epistemic modal logic, but Objectivist Epistemology has implications to epistemic modal logic. Her account is initially a difficult read, but as always, I'm going to try and make the account as accessible as possible. Specifically, what Rand is attempting to do in her Objectivist Epistemology is to give us an epistemological, meaning a knowledge-based theoretical account for a justification of her objectivist stance. And I'm not going to jump immediately into the objectivist stance. That would be putting the cart before the horse. In order to have an understanding of what Rand's objectivist stance is, you can't properly be said to have an understanding of Rand's objectivist stance if you don't have an understanding of her epistemology, right? Her epistemology comes prior to her objectivist stance. So I'm going to give you her epistemology. Again, I'll go slow and try and make this as user-friendly as possible. Okay, so this is Rand's Objectivist Rand's Objectivist Epistemology. The first chapter is entitled, it's very short. I'm not going to be able to go through the first chapter, the entirety of the first chapter in this first video, first series. It'll take me 2 series to go through the video because I want to take time and make sure that we understand the terms that she's using and the implications that they have logically. The first chapter is entitled Cognition and Measurement. So this is going to be chapter 1, section 1. Chapter 1, section 1. Alright, first thing to recognize, very simple, is the claim is that consciousness is an active state. Consciousness is an active state. Well, what does that mean? It's very simple. As a kid, your parent might tell you, you are what you eat. Right? So you might hear the claim, you are what you eat, which means, you know, if you eat lots of healthy things, then you become, your body becomes healthy. If you eat lots of unhealthy things, then your body becomes unhealthy. So that your physical body is a consequence, is contingent upon the activity of your eating. Sort of very simple concept. Well, the concept is exactly the same, right? Consciousness is an active state. Means that my consciousness of the world, the things that I see before me, the Rubik's Cube, the desk, the chair, the camera, all the things that surround me is an active state. It's not that my mind is sort of this passive recipient in sort of a Lockean sense, where the world enforces itself or imposes itself upon my mind. My mind creates, in a sense, reality, right? My mind is a participant of this reality. And that's a mouthful now, but as we progress, I'll try to make that a little bit more user-friendly. I'll make that a little bit clearer. So let's look at this idea of consciousness as an active state. Well, imagine that we have a perceiver, right? And we have the external world and we have an object. The traditional account, right? The traditional account is to say, well, the rationalists make this claim, right? That our mind constitutes the external world. So this is the rationalist stance. And then the empiricists came along and the empiricists said, no, it's the other way around, right? The external world is sort of the conditions for the possibility of my mind, right? So this would be the empiricist. And then obviously Immanuel Kant came around and he made a synthesis of both of these points. And Kant did this in a strategy known as the Copernican revolution. It's a little bit of both, right? There's an external world and it is a viable, valid thing. There is a conscious mind, but it's the relationship between the two. And I've gone through and I've already done a video series on David Hume and Immanuel Kant's synthetic a priori. So you can watch that if you want a more detailed explanation. What Rand is doing is that she's stepping outside of the traditional sort of canonical account of this relationship. There are many who think that Rand is merely giving an empiricist stance, right? And they would be incorrect. Rand is not giving merely an empiricist stance. She is not saying that our consciousness is a condition of objects enforcing themselves or imposing themselves on our mind. She's not saying that. The mind is active for Rand. And she holds also that the world is constituted of objective things, and we'll see what that means. Okay. Consciousness is a state of awareness, right? It is a state of awareness. This is very important, right? It is a state of awareness. It is a state of awareness. Logically speaking, this can be symbolized, and I'm not going to go into the math behind this because I want to keep this user-friendly, but quite a few of you have watched my discussion on Rumsfeld's unknown to known speech, right, and Zizek's sort of response to that. And basically the claim is that if we're talking about Donald Rumsfeld's knowledge of something, we can symbolize it as this, right? Donald Rumsfeld's knowledge of some state of affairs, right? This knowledge of some state of affairs is contingent, right, on his awareness of this state of affairs, whatever that thing might be, right? And I've labeled this state of affairs delta. So it is a state of awareness, right? This awareness is constituted by this, right? And by this. This is the person, or the agent. This is my knowledge. And this is my knowledge of, right? My knowledge of something. In this case, it's my knowledge of some state of affairs delta. So when she says that knowledge is active, and it is knowledge, is an awareness of, consciousness is awareness of, what we're saying is that, and this is very important, what she's saying is that any time we're having or doing or engaged in a discussion of knowledge, especially within an epistemological context, we're talking about an awareness of some entity, some existing thing. And this is what I think most people are overlooking when they discuss Rand, right? Rand is talking about knowledge, but she's saying that our knowledge is always of something. And I'll give examples later, people who have tried to counter her argument, but still what she's saying is that our knowledge is always directed into the world, right? There's some objective thing in the world. And there's a little asterisk with that claim that I'll give you in a moment. And that knowledge comes as a result of my knowledge of some state of affairs, whatever that might be. So what would this look like in a Venn? If you were to construct a Venn diagram, you'd have two circles, right? A larger circle, a smaller circle. In the larger circle, we have awareness. And in the smaller circle, we have consciousness, right? So that consciousness becomes a subset of awareness, right? Consciousness becomes a subset of awareness. There's a greater set, awareness, and constituted within that set is consciousness. The claim for this Venn would be the following. All forms of consciousness are forms of awareness, right? Because all of consciousness is composed within awareness, right? And this is what she says herself, right? Consciousness is a state of awareness. Okay, so all forms of consciousness are forms of awareness. However, and this is important, right? However, and she doesn't say this explicitly, but this is an implication of sort of Rand's objectivist stance. However, not all forms of awareness are forms of consciousness. Not all forms of awareness are forms of consciousness. And what does that mean? Well, that assumes that the awareness, there is some sense an awareness that is unconscious, right? There is some sense of an awareness of things in the world, right? There is an awareness of, as she says, entities, things, embodiment, objects, that is unconscious, right? There has to be this relationship, right? If we make the claim that all forms of consciousness are awareness, then we have to recognize that not all forms of awareness are forms of consciousness. And what does that mean? Basically, the awareness that is unconscious, right? There has to be this awareness that is unconscious. She doesn't specifically go into that and describe that. But logically speaking, it should follow. And what I've been doing for a while now is I've been trying to identify what exactly that thing is. This is my first video on Rand, on Rand, but I've been I've been studying her Objectivist Epistemology for a while, and I did a video, obviously, as I said before, on the idea of the unknown known. The unknown known as it relates to a discussion on Rumsfeld's speech that he gave on the known unknowns, and Zizek's response to that, right? The unknown known. Well, the unknown known sort of fits into this category, right? The thing that is a part of awareness, but is not a part of my consciousness, right? There is an awareness out there that my consciousness does not yet have access to. And I'm going to try to explain what this might be in a colloquial sense. The symbolization of it escapes me, though. Okay.